Heavenly Father, I pray for everyone watching this video right now. May you bless them with peace, joy, and breakthroughs in their lives. Amen. Hello, my wonderful family. I am so glad and grateful to have you here with me today. Your support means the world, and I truly don't take it for granted. Before we dive into today's powerful story, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and of course, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update from this channel. You actually think you can solve this? The billionaire's voice carried across the marble hall, dripping with disbelief that made Elena Nakamura's hands tremble as she clutched the cleaning supplies she'd forgotten she was still holding. The laughter started small, a chuckle from someone in the back, then spread like wildfire through the crowd of Japan's most brilliant minds. Mathematicians who dedicated their entire careers to theoretical problems. Tech executives whose algorithms had revolutionized industries. Nobel laureates whose discoveries had changed the world. And here she was, a 32-year-old woman in a gray uniform, standing before them like a lamb volunteering for slaughter. What am I doing? The thought screamed through Elena's mind as 200 pairs of eyes dissected her with surgical precision. I clean their offices. I empty their trash. I'm nobody, But the equation on the massive screen behind Hiroshi Tanaka, the tech mogul whose fortune could buy small countries, had been haunting her for 3 weeks. Every night as she cleaned his private study, she'd stolen glances at his work. Every morning, she'd solved pieces of it in her head while scrubbing floors. The problem that had stumped the world's greatest minds had become her secret obsession. Miss, Tanaka's voice cut through her internal hurricane, and she realized he was waiting for her name. Elena Nakamura, she whispered, then forced herself to speak louder. Elena Nakamura. Miss Nakamura. He pronounced each syllable with the careful precision of someone handling something distasteful. Are you seriously suggesting that you, a cleaning lady, can solve the quantum consciousness bridge that has eluded the combined efforts of MIT, Stanford, and Tokyo University? The mocking was getting louder now. Someone in the front row, she recognized him as Dr. Yamamoto from the university's mathematics department, was actually wiping tears from his eyes. A woman in an expensive suit leaned over to her companion, not bothering to lower her voice. This is embarrassing. Security should remove her. Elena's cheeks burned with shame so intense it felt like physical pain. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to return to the invisible safety of her mop and bucket, to pretend this moment had never happened. But something else held her frozen in place. Something that had been building inside her for 20 years, ever since she'd been forced to drop out of her mathematics PhD program to care for her dying mother. The challenge, she said, her voice barely audible, states that whoever can prove the mathematical bridge between quantum mechanics and human consciousness will receive $500 million. Her hands were shaking so violently now that she had to clasp them behind her back. It doesn't say they have to have a degree. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the laughter. It was the silence of people watching a car accident in slow motion, unable to look away from the inevitable destruction. Tanaka's expression shifted from amusement to something sharper, more calculating. For just a moment, Elena caught something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition that made her stomach drop. Did he know? Had he seen her in his study? Was this all some elaborate trap? Very well, he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of a judge pronouncing sentence. You have 15 minutes to present your solution. But understand this, Miss Nakamura. When you fail, as you inevitably will, you won't just embarrass yourself. You'll be banned from every building I own in this city. You'll never work again. The cruelty in his words hit her like a physical blow, but Elena nodded anyway. Because buried in that threat, she'd heard something else. Something that made her pulse race with terrifying possibility. He'd said when she failed, not if, which meant he already knew she had an answer. As she walked toward the screen, each step feeling like she was walking toward her execution, Elena's mind raced back to 3 weeks ago. To the night she'd been cleaning Tanaka's study and had seen him standing at his window, shoulders shaking with what she'd thought was grief. To the photograph on his desk. A young woman who looked exactly like Elena, smiling beside mathematical equations that had made Elena's breath catch. To the name written in the corner of that photograph. Akiko Tanaka, 1987-2019. Elena had spent 20 years believing her mathematical gift had died with her mother's cancer diagnosis. But as she picked up the marker with hands that had stopped trembling, she finally understood the truth. Some gifts don't die. They just wait in the shadows, preparing for the moment when everything, absolutely everything, depends on their resurrection. Welcome to another story that will remind you why you should never underestimate the power of someone who has nothing left to lose. I'm so glad you're here with me today. But Elena's about to discover that solving the equation is only the beginning. Because Hiroshi Tanaka hasn't spent 25 years searching for this answer, just for the mathematical breakthrough. There's something else he wants. Something connected to that photograph in his study. Something that will force Elena to confront a truth about her own past that will shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. And the clock is ticking. 15 minutes to prove herself. 15 minutes to claim a fortune. 15 minutes to discover that some challenges aren't about mathematics at all. They're about survival. Elena's hand moved across the whiteboard with a confidence that seemed to emerge from somewhere deep inside her muscle memory. The first equation flowed like breathing, natural, inevitable, as if her fingers had been waiting 20 years to write these symbols. But as the mathematical poetry took shape, she became aware of the shifting energy in the room. The laughter had died completely, replaced by something far more dangerous. Genuine attention. Impossible, she heard Dr. Yamamoto whisper to his colleague. She's using Akiko's original framework. Akiko. The name hit Elena like a physical blow, and her marker paused mid-calculation. In her peripheral vision, she saw Tanaka's face go rigid, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his chair. 25 years ago, Elena had been the star of Tokyo University's mathematics program. The youngest PhD candidate they'd ever accepted, with a dissertation on quantum consciousness that had professors calling her the most brilliant mind of her generation. She'd had everything: a full scholarship, a mentor who believed in her work, and a research partner named Akiko Tanaka, who shared her obsession with bridging the impossible gap between physics and human awareness. They'd been inseparable, Elena and Akiko. Two young women in a field dominated by older men, working 18-hour days in a cramped lab, surviving on convenience store coffee, and the shared certainty that they were on the verge of changing everything. Akiko was the daughter of some minor businessman, or so Elena had thought. Brilliant but grounded, the practical complement to Elena's more theoretical mind. Until the night everything collapsed. Elena's mother's cancer diagnosis had come without warning, aggressive and terminal. Within weeks, Elena had been forced to choose between her dreams and her family's survival. The medical bills, the need for constant care. There had been no choice at all, really. She'd withdrawn from the program, taken the first job she could find, and watched her mathematical future disappear like smoke. But Akiko had promised to continue their work, to include Elena's name on any publications, to share whatever discoveries came from the foundation they'd built together. Instead, Elena had spent 20 years cleaning buildings and watching from the shadows as Dr. Akiko Tanaka, not the simple surname Elena had known, published paper after paper based on their shared research, had watched her former partner become famous, wealthy, celebrated, while Elena emptied trash cans and scrubbed floors in buildings owned by Akiko's family. The betrayal had been so complete, so devastating, that Elena had convinced herself she'd imagined her own brilliance. That the mathematics she still solved in her head while working was just the desperate fantasy of a woman who'd lost everything. Elena! The voice came from directly behind her, and she spun around to find a woman in an expensive black suit standing far closer than the rest of the crowd. Dr. Maid, according to the conference badge from the Tokyo Institute of Technology. But something about her felt familiar in a way that made Elena's skin crawl. Dr. Zhang, Elena managed, trying to place where she'd seen this woman before. I knew your work, May said quietly, her voice carrying just far enough to reach Elena, but not the crowd. From before. When you were at the university. Her smile was sharp, predatory. Akiko used to talk about you constantly. Her brilliant research partner who just disappeared. Elena's blood turned to ice. You knew Akiko? No, May corrected, her smile widening. Present tense. Though I suppose that's no longer accurate. She glanced meaningfully at Tanaka, who was watching their interaction with the intensity of a hawk tracking prey. Tell me, Elena, when you left the program, did you ever wonder what happened to your original research notes? The ones you left in the lab? The marker slipped from Elena's fingers, clattering to the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room. What are you talking about? The work that made Akiko Tanaka famous, May continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The research that launched her career and eventually led to her marriage to Hiroshi Tanaka. Did you ever wonder where she got the initial breakthrough? Elena's world tilted sideways. Marriage. Akiko had married Hiroshi Tanaka. Which meant, the photograph in his study, Elena breathed, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. The woman who looked like me. That was Akiko. Was, May confirmed. Car accident 5 years ago. Very tragic. Though some of us always wondered if it was really an accident, given what she discovered about the true origins of her work. The room began to spin around Elena, voices and faces blurring into a kaleidoscope of confusion and horror. Everything she'd believed about the last 20 years was crumbling, revealing a truth so much worse than simple abandonment. Akiko hadn't just stolen Elena's research. She'd built an entire life on it. Fame, fortune, marriage to one of Japan's most powerful men. And now that she was dead, why are you telling me this? Elena whispered. May's expression shifted, becoming almost maternal. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because Hiroshi has been searching for the woman whose work his wife stole for over 5 years now. This challenge, this ridiculous spectacle, it was never about finding the best mathematician in Japan, Elena. It was about flushing you out of hiding. Elena's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the edge of the whiteboard stand, her knuckles white with the effort of staying upright. He knows who I am? He's always known, May said gently. The question is, what does he plan to do about it? Across the room, Tanaka rose from his chair with the fluid grace of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. His eyes met Elena's, and for the first time since she'd entered the room, his expression held no mockery. Only a cold, calculating intelligence that made her blood freeze. Time, he announced to the room, though Elena's 15 minutes weren't close to over. Miss Nakamura, I believe you have something that belongs to me. The crowd stirred, confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere, but Elena understood perfectly. This had never been about the challenge. It had never been about the $500 million. It had been about revenge. And she had walked right into the trap. You see, Tanaka continued, moving toward her with deliberate steps. My late wife left behind some very interesting research notes. Notes that detailed the true origin of her most celebrated work. Work that, according to her private journals, belonged to someone else entirely. Elena's mouth went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't, Tanaka smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Elena had ever seen. Because 20 years ago, you were so eager to play the noble daughter that you never bothered to file proper copyright claims on your research. You simply disappeared, leaving everything behind for someone else to claim. The room was dead silent now, every person present sensing the shift from academic challenge to something far more personal and dangerous. But here's what my dear wife never knew. Tanaka's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I've spent the last 5 years tracking down every record, every trace of your original work. And I've discovered something fascinating. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio, placing it on the table beside him with ceremonial precision. Your research wasn't just brilliant, Miss Nakamura. It was revolutionary. Worth far more than the academic recognition Akiko received for it. Worth billions, in fact, if properly developed. His eyes glittered with something that might have been madness. Which is why you're going to help me finish what you started. Willingly or otherwise. Elena's hands began to shake again, but this time it wasn't from nerves. It was from rage, 20 years of suppressed fury finally finding its voice. And if I refuse? Tanaka's smile widened. Then I'll make sure the world knows exactly what happened 20 years ago. I'll destroy what little life you've managed to build for yourself. And then I'll find your mother's medical debt. Yes, I know about that too, and I'll call it in. All of it, with 20 years of accumulated interest. The betrayal was so complete, so perfectly orchestrated, that Elena almost admired its ruthlessness. Almost. But as she looked around the room, at the confused faces of the academic elite, at Mei Zhang's carefully neutral expression, at the security guards who had quietly positioned themselves near the exits, Elena realized something that Tanaka had failed to consider. He'd just made a crucial mistake. He'd revealed that he needed her alive and cooperative. Which meant, for the first time in 20 years, Elena held the power. And she was about to show him exactly what a cornered mathematician was capable of. Elena's laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. You want me to finish the work that was stolen from me? How poetic. But even as she spoke, her mind was racing through the implications. If Tanaka had been tracking her for 5 years, if he knew about her mother's medical debt, what else did he know? Her small apartment in Shibuya. Her routine. Her. Oh God. The realization hit her like a physical blow. My mother. Tanaka's smile confirmed her worst fears. Still alive, despite the terminal diagnosis 20 years ago. Remarkable woman. Stubborn just like her daughter. Currently residing in the Sakura Care Facility in Akasaka, where she's been receiving the finest medical treatment money can buy. Elena's legs gave out completely, and she sank onto the nearest chair. You've been paying for her care? For the past 5 years, Tanaka confirmed. Ever since I discovered the truth about my wife's research. Consider it an investment in our future partnership. The room around them had grown so quiet that Elena could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. The academic elite who had come to witness a mathematical challenge were now watching something far more intimate and devastating. The systematic destruction of a woman's entire life. You see, Miss Nakamura, Tanaka continued, settling into the chair across from her with the casual confidence of a man who held all the cards. Your research wasn't just about bridging quantum mechanics and consciousness. You were developing a practical application, a way to enhance human cognitive capacity through quantum field manipulation. Elena's blood ran cold. She had been working on that in the final months before she'd been forced to leave. Theoretical frameworks for using quantum entanglement to expand neural processing power. But she'd never imagined anyone would actually try to implement it. Akiko never understood the true implications of your work, Tanaka continued. She published the theoretical components, yes, but she lacked the mathematical elegance to make the practical leap. That's why I need you, Elena. To finish what you started. And if I refuse? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Then your mother's treatment stops immediately. She has perhaps 6 months without the experimental therapies that have kept her alive this long. Tanaka's voice carried no emotion, as if he were discussing the weather. And that's assuming she doesn't suffer an unfortunate accident first. The threat hung in the air like poison, but before Elena could respond, Dr. Meizhong stepped forward again. There's something else you should know, Mei said, her voice cutting through the tension with surgical precision. About why Hiroshi is so desperate to complete your work. Tanaka's head snapped toward her, his composure cracking for the first time. Dr. Zhang, I don't think. His son, Mei continued, ignoring Tanaka's warning. Kenji Tanaka, age 12, diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, a rare genetic variant that's been destroying his cognitive function for the past 2 years. Elena looked between them, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to click into place. You want to use my research to save your son. The cognitive enhancement protocols you developed, Tanaka said, his voice now strained with something that might have been desperation, could potentially reverse the neural degradation. Create new pathways faster than the disease can destroy them. For the first time since she'd entered the room, Elena saw Tanaka not as a predator, but as a father. A man who had spent 5 years hunting down the one person who might be able to save his child, using every resource at his disposal to force her cooperation. But there's more, Mei said, and Elena caught something in her tone, a warning carefully disguised. Tell her about the other applications, Hiroshi. Tell her what else your research team has discovered. Tanaka's jaw tightened. That's classified. Memory manipulation, Mei said anyway, her eyes locked on Elena's. Complete cognitive restructuring. The ability to rewrite human consciousness entirely. She paused, letting the implications sink in. The Japanese Defense Ministry has been very interested in your work, Elena, as has the CIA, and several other organizations that prefer to remain unnamed. Elena's world tilted again. Her research, her pure theoretical exploration of human consciousness, had become a weapon. A tool for controlling minds, erasing memories, reshaping human identity itself. The challenge was never about the money, Elena breathed, understanding flooding through her like ice water. It was about time. You needed to find me before someone else did. There are teams closing in from 3 different directions, Mei confirmed. The Americans, the Chinese, and a private military contractor, whose identity we haven't been able to determine. Each one believes they can complete your work without you. But they can't, Tanaka said, rising from his chair with renewed urgency. We've tried for 5 years. The mathematical frameworks require an intuitive understanding that can't be replicated or reverse engineered. It has to be you. Elena looked around the room at the faces watching her, some confused, some calculating, some genuinely frightened by what they were hearing. These weren't just academics anymore. They were witnesses to something that could reshape the future of human consciousness itself. And if I help you, Elena said slowly, if I complete the research to save your son, what guarantee do I have that it won't be weaponized? None, Tanaka admitted with brutal honesty. But without it, Kenji will be dead within 18 months. And your mother will follow soon after. The silence that followed was broken by the soft chime of May's phone. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. We're out of time, she said urgently. There's been a development. She held up her phone, showing a news alert that made Elena's stomach drop. Explosion rocks Sakura Care Facility. Casualties reported. No, Elena whispered, but Tanaka was already moving, his phone pressed to his ear. Security report, he barked into the device. Is the target secure? Elena couldn't hear the response, but she could see the answer in Tanaka's face as his complexion went ashen. What? Elena demanded, rising from her chair on unsteady legs. What happened to my mother? Tanaka lowered his phone, his carefully constructed facade finally crumbling completely. She's gone. Someone got to her first. The room exploded into chaos as Elena's scream of anguish tore through the air, but May's voice cut through it all with terrifying clarity. The other teams weren't trying to complete the research without you, Elena. They were eliminating your motivation to cooperate with anyone else. Elena's grief transformed into something far more dangerous, cold, calculating rage. Who? We don't know yet, May said, but Elena caught the slight flicker in her eyes that suggested otherwise. But whoever it was just made a critical mistake. What mistake? Elena's voice was deadly quiet now. May's smile was sharp as a blade. They assumed your mother was your only leverage point. They don't know about the backup protocols you built into the research. The ones that require weekly verification codes to prevent the data from self-destructing. Elena stared at her, recognition dawning. How do you know about the backup protocols? Because, May said, her entire demeanor shifting as she reached into her jacket and produced a badge that made Elena's blood freeze. I'm Dr. Mei Zhang, CIA Advanced Research Division. And I've been hunting for Elena Nakamura a lot longer than 5 years. The room went dead silent as the final pieces of the trap revealed themselves. Elena wasn't just caught between Tanaka's desperation and foreign agents. She was standing in the center of an international intelligence war, and her research had just become the most dangerous weapon on Earth. Elena's hands shook as she stared at May's CIA badge, but it wasn't fear that made them tremble. It was pure, crystalline rage. How long have you known where I was? 3 years, May admitted, pocketing the badge with casual efficiency. We've been monitoring your work patterns, your routine, waiting for the right moment to approach you. My mother's death, Elena's voice was deadly quiet. Was that the right moment? Before May could answer, the conference room's lights suddenly dimmed and the main screen flickered to life, displaying a video feed that made everyone in the room freeze. A young boy, perhaps 12 years old, sat in what appeared to be a sterile medical facility. His eyes, though bright with intelligence, held the hollow confusion that Elena recognized from her mother's final months. This had to be Kenji Tanaka. Hello, father, the boy said to the camera, his voice carrying an adult's weariness that no child should possess. I hope you're watching. I hope you understand what you've done. Tanaka stumbled forward, his face etched with pure terror. Kenji? How is this? Where are you? The people who took me want to make sure you understand the stakes, Kenji continued, his words precise despite the obvious cognitive strain. They know about the woman who created the research. They know about the protocols. And they know that you need both to save me. The feed cut to a different angle, revealing a figure in shadow standing behind the boy. When the figure spoke, Elena's blood turned to ice. Hello, Elena. The voice was warm, familiar, impossible. I've missed you. No, Elena whispered, but even as denial escaped her lips, she knew the truth. The voice belonged to someone she'd thought was dead for 5 years. Akiko, Tanaka breathed, his face cycling through disbelief, hope, and horror in rapid succession. The figure stepped into the light, and Elena's world shattered completely. Akiko Tanaka stood there, very much alive, her appearance changed, shorter hair, surgical scars along her jaw that suggested extensive facial reconstruction. But undeniably, devastatingly real. Surprised, Akiko's smile was razor-sharp as she placed a protective hand on Kenji's shoulder. I've had 5 years to plan this reunion, Elena. 5 years to think about what you cost me. What I cost you? Elena's voice cracked with disbelief. You stole my research. You built your entire life on work that was mine. Work that was ours, Akiko corrected. Work that you abandoned when things got difficult. Do you have any idea what I sacrificed to keep our research alive after you disappeared? Around them, the room had erupted into chaos. Security guards were speaking rapidly into headsets, academic observers were fleeing toward the exits, and Mei Zhang was typing furiously on a device that definitely wasn't a standard phone. But Elena could only focus on the screen, on the impossible resurrection of her former friend turned betrayer. I had to marry him, Akiko continued, gesturing dismissively toward Tanaka, who looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Had to pretend to love a man who saw me only as a brilliant accessory to his empire. Had to give birth to his child and watch that child inherit the very genetic defect our research could have prevented. All because you weren't there to complete what we started. The car accident, Elena managed. 5 years ago. Staged, Akiko confirmed. I needed to disappear, to work on completing your research without interference. The cognitive enhancement protocols required field testing, and Hiroshi's connections provided the perfect laboratory. Her expression darkened. Prisoners, mental patients, volunteers who had no idea what they were agreeing to. Over 300 subjects, Elena. Do you want to know how many survived the initial trials? Elena felt bile rise in her throat. How many? 17, Akiko said with clinical detachment. But those 17, they became something extraordinary. Enhanced cognitive capacity, perfect memory recall, the ability to process information at superhuman speeds. Unfortunately, they also became completely psychotic within 6 months. Mei Zhang stepped closer to Elena, her voice low and urgent. That's why we need your original protocols. The ones Akiko has been trying to reverse engineer are fundamentally flawed. They create enhancement, but they destroy empathy, conscience, basic human emotion. And yet, Akiko continued from the screen, the applications have been profitable. Various governments are very interested in soldiers who feel no pain, no fear, no hesitation. Workers who can process vast amounts of data without fatigue or error. The demand far exceeds our current production capacity. Elena's legs gave out again, but this time, someone caught her. Strong arms wrapped around her waist, steadying her as the full horror of what her research had become crashed over her in waves. I've got you, a voice said softly near her ear, and Elena looked up to find herself staring into warm brown eyes she didn't recognize. The man holding her was roughly her age, wearing the simple black uniform of building security, but there was something in his expression, intelligence, compassion, and a kind of focused intensity that seemed completely at odds with his apparent role. Who are you? Elena whispered. Someone who's been waiting a very long time to meet you, he replied, helping her to a chair while keeping his body positioned protectively between her and the rest of the room. My name is Kai Nakayama. Let's say I'm a freelance specialist in recovering stolen intellectual property. Before Elena could process this new complication, Akiko's voice drew her attention back to the screen. I'm prepared to offer you a deal, Elena. Complete the consciousness bridge using your original, stable protocols. Help me perfect the enhancement process without the psychological side effects. In exchange, I'll release Kenji and split the profits from our research 50-50. And if I refuse? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Then Kenji dies slowly and painfully from the very disease our research could cure, and I release the current flawed version of the enhancement protocol to the highest bidder. Imagine millions of enhanced humans with no capacity for empathy or moral restraint, Elena. Imagine what they could accomplish. Tanaka had sunk into a chair, his face buried in his hands. She's my wife, he said brokenly. How could I not have known? Because you saw what you wanted to see, Mei said bluntly. A brilliant woman who could enhance your reputation and provide you with an heir. You never bothered to look deeper. Kai leaned closer to Elena, his voice barely audible. There's something else you need to know. About the backup protocols you built into your research. Elena turned to him, recognizing something in his tone that made her pulse quicken. What about them? They're not just security measures, are they? His eyes held a depth of understanding that was impossible unless. You built in a kill switch. A way to destroy not just the data, but any technology based on your research. Elena's breath caught. How could he possibly know that? Because, Kai continued, answering her unspoken question, I helped you design it. 20 years ago, in a coffee shop near Tokyo University, when you were terrified about the implications of what you were creating. Elena stared at him, memories flooding back. A graduate student in computer science, quiet and brilliant, who had listened to her fears about the potential misuse of her research and helped her build safeguards into the very foundation of her work. Kai Nakayama, who had disappeared from the university just weeks before her own forced departure. You, she breathed. But you said your name was Kai Sato back then, he confirmed. I had to change my identity after certain organizations became interested in my ability to create untraceable digital weapons. His smile was sad but warm. I've been tracking your research for 20 years, Elena, trying to prevent exactly this from happening. On the screen, Akiko was checking her watch with theatrical precision. You have 1 hour to decide, Elena. 1 hour to choose between saving one child and preventing a global catastrophe. The coordinates for the exchange are being sent to your phone now. The feed cut out, leaving the room in stunned silence. Elena looked around at the faces surrounding her, May with her calculating intelligence, Tanaka with his desperate grief, Kai with his gentle strength, and realized that everyone in this room had been lying to her about something fundamental. But as her phone buzzed with an incoming message containing coordinates to a location in Tokyo Bay, Elena made a decision that surprised even herself. I'll do it, she said quietly. I'll complete the research. Relief flooded Tanaka's face, but May's expression darkened. Elena, you can't possibly. But not the way any of you expect, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. I'm going to activate the kill switch. I'm going to destroy everything, the original research, the flawed versions, all of it. That would kill Kenji, Tanaka said desperately. And potentially everyone who's been enhanced by the flawed protocols. Maybe, Elena acknowledged. Or maybe it will free them from what they've become. She looked directly at Kai, seeing understanding dawn in his eyes. Some things are too dangerous to exist. Even if destroying them costs us everything. Kai nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a military communicator. Then we're going to need backup. Because Akiko isn't the only one who wants your research intact. As if summoned by his words, the building's fire alarms began screaming, and through the conference room's windows, Elena could see helicopters approaching from 3 different directions. The true war for her research was about to begin. The helicopters were closing fast, their rotors creating a thunderous symphony of approaching violence. But Elena found herself oddly calm as Kai's hand found hers. For the first time in 20 years, she wasn't alone with the weight of her brilliance. The kill switch, she said, squeezing his fingers as memories flooded back. You helped me hide it in the quantum entanglement matrices. Anyone trying to access the core protocols without the proper sequence would trigger a cascade failure that destroys all related neural pathways, Kai finished, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. I remember. You were so afraid of what governments might do with your work. Something warm unfurled in Elena's chest, a feeling she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten it existed. Trust. Connection. The intoxicating possibility that someone might actually understand her. Elena, May called urgently from her position by the window. We need to move. Now. Those aren't all CIA helicopters. But Elena barely heard her. She was lost in Kai's eyes, in the memory of late nights in the university computer lab when they'd worked side by side, building safeguards into research that could reshape human consciousness. He'd been the only person who'd understood both her brilliance and her terror. I never forgot you, Kai said softly, leaning closer. 20 years, and I never stopped looking. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted like redemption, like coming home after decades of exile. Elena felt herself melting into him, every wall she'd built around her heart crumbling at his touch. Which made it even more devastating when she felt the sharp prick of the needle sliding into her neck. I'm sorry, Kai whispered against her lips as the world began to tilt sideways. I'm so sorry, but I need you compliant for the extraction. Elena tried to pull away, but her limbs were already growing heavy, her vision blurring at the edges. Kai! What? The neural interface drugs will keep you conscious but cooperative, he explained, his voice maintaining that same gentle tone even as he betrayed her completely. Standard protocol for high-value intelligence assets. Assets. The word hit her like a physical blow. You're not CIA, Elena managed, her tongue thick and unresponsive. Hayashi Corporation Advanced Research Division, Kai confirmed, helping her into a chair as her legs gave out. We've been developing competing consciousness enhancement technology for the past 15 years. But we could never crack the quantum consciousness bridge without your original work. Elena's world shattered into fragments. Hayashi Corporation. one of Japan's most secretive defense contractors, rumored to have connections to human experimentation programs that made the Nazi research look ethical. You've been watching me for 20 years? Following you, yes. Protecting you from other organizations who wanted to recruit you by force. Kai's expression was genuinely pained, as if her betrayal hurt him more than it hurt her. The maid position at Tanaka's building? We arranged that. Your mother's extended medical care? That was us too, not Tanaka. The room spun violently around Elena as the implications crashed over her. My mother? Alive, Kai confirmed. Though she's been in our facility for the past 5 years, receiving experimental treatments that have kept her consciousness sharp even as her body deteriorated. We needed you to have a reason to cooperate willingly. Elena tried to stand, to rage, to fight, but the drugs had turned her muscles to water. The explosion at the care facility. Staged to force your hand, May said from across the room, her own gun now trained on Tanaka. Though I have to admit, we weren't expecting Akiko to surface with her own agenda. Elena's head snapped toward May, confusion cutting through the chemical haze. We. May's smile was sharp as glass. Dr. Mei Zhang, Hayashi Corporation Neural Sciences Division. Kai's supervisor, and the architect of this entire operation. The betrayal was so complete, so perfectly orchestrated, that Elena almost admired its efficiency. Almost. You played me, she whispered. All of you. From the beginning. Not all of us, Tanaka said quietly from his chair, his face gray with shock. I genuinely believed my wife was dead. I genuinely needed your help to save my son. About that, May said, consulting her tablet with clinical detachment. Analysis of the video feed suggests the boy in Akiko's custody isn't actually your son. Tanaka's face went white. What? Facial recognition software indicates a 73% probability that the child is actually one of the enhanced subjects from Akiko's experiments. Probably conditioned to believe he's Kenji Tanaka. May's voice carried no emotion as she delivered the devastating news. Your real son has likely been dead for months. The sound that escaped Tanaka's throat was barely human, part sob, part roar of anguish. He lunged toward May, but she casually shifted her weapon and fired a single shot into his leg, dropping him to the floor. Please remain seated, Mr. Tanaka. We still need you for the financial transfers once we've secured Elena's cooperation. Elena watched Tanaka writhing on the floor, blood pooling beneath his leg, and felt something cold and implacable settle in her chest. These people, all of them, had turned her life into a chess game, moving pieces around her for decades while she believed she was making her own choices. The consciousness enhancement protocols, she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the drugs coursing through her system. How many people have you tested them on? Approximately 1,200 subjects over the past 5 years, May answered matter-of-factly. Military volunteers, prisoners, patients in vegetative states. The survival rate has improved dramatically since we began incorporating elements of your theoretical framework. Survival rate? Currently sitting at 43%, Kai said, his expression genuinely regretful. But the enhanced subjects who do survive show remarkable cognitive improvements. Enhanced memory, accelerated learning, perfect emotional control. Perfect emotional control. Elena's blood ran cold as the true horror of what they'd created settled over her. You've lobotomized them, she breathed. You've taken everything that makes them human and burned it out of their brains. We've optimized them, May corrected. Removed the evolutionary inefficiencies that make humans vulnerable to fear, grief, irrational decision-making. You've created monsters. We've created the next step in human evolution, May replied calmly. And with your help, we're going to perfect the process. The building shook as the first helicopter landed on the roof, followed immediately by the staccato burst of automatic weapons fire from somewhere above them. That would be the Americans, May observed, checking her watch. Right on schedule. Elena, we need to move you to the extraction point. But Elena was no longer listening, because in her peripheral vision, she'd caught sight of something that made her heart stop completely. The whiteboard where she'd been writing her equations. The mathematical poetry that had flowed from her fingers like breathing. Except now, looking at it through the haze of drugs and betrayal, she could see what she'd actually written. It wasn't the consciousness bridge at all. It was the activation sequence for the kill switch. And she'd written it in full view of everyone in the room. Oh God, she whispered, understanding flooding through her like ice water. You made me write it. The drugs, they were designed to make me write the activation sequence. Kai's expression shifted from regret to something far more dangerous. Neural pathway stimulation combined with muscle memory activation. We've been studying your handwriting patterns for 20 years, Elena. We knew exactly which drugs would make you write what we needed. The room around them erupted into chaos as armed figures in black tactical gear rappelled through the windows, but Elena could only stare at the board in horror. She just handed them the keys to destroying or controlling every consciousness enhancement protocol on Earth, including the ones keeping her mother alive. The kill switch, she said desperately, trying to fight through the drugs. If you activate it, it will kill everyone currently connected to enhancement technology, yes, May confirmed, including the 1,200 enhanced subjects currently serving in military operations around the globe, including your mother. But it will also clear the field for our next-generation protocols, the ones that won't have such inconvenient vulnerabilities. Elena's scream of rage and despair was lost in the sound of gunfire as the true war for human consciousness exploded around them. And in that moment, as bullets shattered windows and smoke filled the air, Elena realized that everyone she'd trusted had been lying to her. Everyone except the one person she'd believed was her enemy. Akiko had been telling the truth about the stakes. The question was, did Elena have the strength to stop the people who'd controlled her entire life, even if it meant trusting the woman who'd betrayed her 20 years ago? The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the soft hiss of smoke grenades and Tanaka's labored breathing. Elena's vision cleared enough to see figures in tactical gear surrounding them, but these weren't ordinary soldiers. They moved with an inhuman precision, their faces blank of any emotion, their eyes holding the cold emptiness that Elena now recognized with sickening clarity. These were the enhanced subjects, the 43% who had survived Hayashi Corporation's experiments. Beautiful, aren't they? May said, rising from behind an overturned table without a trace of fear. Project Tabula Rasa. Soldiers without trauma, workers without fatigue, humans without the weaknesses that have held our species back for millennia. One of the enhanced soldiers approached Elena, and she felt her blood freeze as she recognized his face. Lieutenant Takashi Yamada, who had disappeared during a military training exercise 3 years ago. His family had been told he died in a helicopter crash. "Hello, Dr. Nakamura," Takashi said, his voice carrying none of the warmth she remembered from the news interviews with his grieving wife. "I have been instructed to ensure your cooperation with the research completion." "Takashi," Elena whispered, fighting against the drugs to keep her voice steady. "Do you remember your family? Your daughter's 5th birthday party?" For just a moment, something flickered behind his eyes, a shadow of the man he had been. Then it was gone, replaced by that terrifying emptiness. "Personal attachments are inefficient," he replied mechanically. "They compromise operational effectiveness." Elena's heart shattered as she understood the full scope of what had been done. They hadn't just enhanced these people, they had erased everything that made them human. "The process is irreversible," Kai said quietly, reading her expression. "We tried to maintain some emotional capacity in early trials, but subjects with retained empathy experienced severe psychological breaks when given conflicting orders. Complete emotional ablation was the only stable solution." "Solution?" Elena's voice cracked with horror. "You turned them into machines." "We perfected them," May corrected, activating a tablet that displayed dozens of video feeds from around the globe. Enhanced soldiers in 12 countries, working with perfect efficiency. Crime rates in test cities have dropped 90% where enhanced police officers have been deployed. Industrial accidents have virtually disappeared in factories staffed with enhanced workers. The screens showed the future May was describing. Empty-eyed humans performing their tasks with mechanical precision, no hesitation, no rebellion, no joy. A world where human consciousness had been optimized out of existence. "And now," May continued, "we're ready for global deployment. The consciousness bridge you've provided will allow us to enhance entire populations simultaneously through quantum field manipulation. Within 5 years, every human on Earth could be optimized." Elena tried to stand, to fight, but the drugs made her limbs feel like lead. "You can't force this on people. They have to choose. Choice is an illusion that causes suffering," one of the enhanced soldiers said with perfect calm. "Optimization eliminates the burden of choice." Through the smoke and chaos, Elena heard a sound that made her soul crack open completely. Her mother's voice, transmitted through speakers hidden throughout the room. "Elena? Sweetheart, can you hear me?" Elena's breath caught as a large screen descended from the ceiling, revealing her mother's face. Hiroko Nakamura looked exactly as Elena remembered from 5 years ago. Alert, intelligent, beloved. But she was connected to machines that Elena now understood were not keeping her alive, but keeping her conscious. "Mom," Elena sobbed, the drugs making her emotions raw and uncontrollable. "They tell me you're going to help them with their research," her mother said, her voice carrying the same gentle strength Elena remembered from childhood. "They tell me it will save people." "It won't," Elena whispered. "Mom, it won't save people. It will destroy them." Her mother's expression shifted, confusion clouding her features. "But they showed me the results. The soldiers who don't feel pain anymore. The workers who never get tired. Isn't that good?" Elena realized with dawning horror that her mother had been conditioned, her perceptions altered by years of subtle manipulation. The woman who had raised her to value compassion above all else now saw the elimination of human emotion as a mercy. "Your mother volunteered for the preliminary consciousness adjustments," May explained with clinical detachment. "She wanted to understand what you were creating. The process has been educational for both of you." "You experimented on her," Elena breathed. "We optimized her perspective," May corrected. "She no longer experiences the anxiety and depression that plagued her final years. She's perfectly content." On the screen, Elena's mother smiled with an expression of serene emptiness that Elena recognized with sick certainty. They had done to her what they'd done to the soldiers. Burned out everything that made her human while leaving her consciousness intact. "I love you, Elena," her mother said, but the words carried no warmth, no depth. They were just sounds, empty of meaning. Elena's scream of anguish echoed through the room, but it was cut short by Kai's hand on her shoulder. "There's still a way to save her," he said urgently. "The enhancement process is reversible in its early stages. If you complete the consciousness bridge, we can restore her original neural patterns." "And if I refuse?" "Then she dies when we activate the kill switch in 6 hours," May said matter-of-factly. "Along with every other enhanced subject worldwide. We're prepared to clear the board entirely if necessary, Elena. Start fresh with willing volunteers." Elena looked around the room at the faces watching her. May with her cold calculation, Kai with his gentle manipulation, the enhanced soldiers with their empty stares, Tanaka bleeding on the floor as he mourned a son who was already dead. "There's no way out, is there?" Elena asked, her voice hollow with despair. "Every choice I make leads to horror." "Welcome to the burden of genius," May replied. "The same intelligence that creates revolutionary breakthroughs also bears responsibility for their consequences." Before Elena could respond, another screen activated, showing Akiko's face. But now Elena could see her former friend clearly. The surgical scars weren't from reconstruction, they were from neural interface implants. Akiko had enhanced herself with the flawed protocols, and the madness in her eyes was the price of that enhancement. "Hello again, Elena," Akiko said, her voice carrying an edge of barely controlled violence. "I see you've met your real captors. Impressive, isn't it? 20 years of manipulation, and you never suspected a thing." "Akiko," Elena whispered, "what have you done to yourself?" "I've become what our research was always meant to create," Akiko replied. "Posthuman. Beyond the limitations of natural consciousness. And now I'm going to offer you one final choice." The camera pulled back to reveal dozens of enhanced subjects standing behind Akiko, but these weren't the empty-eyed soldiers in Elena's room. These subjects were different. Their eyes held intelligence, emotion, even humor. They looked human. "I've perfected the protocols," Akiko continued. "Found a way to enhance cognitive capacity without destroying emotional depth. But the process requires the original consciousness bridge, your consciousness bridge, Elena." "Impossible," May snapped. "Our research shows that emotional retention leads to psychological instability." "Your research is flawed," Akiko replied with a smile that held genuine warmth for the first time. "You've been trying to eliminate emotion instead of integrating it. But consciousness isn't a bug to be fixed, Elena. It's a feature to be enhanced." Elena stared at the screen, hope and terror warring in her chest. "What do you want?" "Come to me," Akiko said simply. "Bring the activation sequence. Help me complete the true enhancement. One that makes humans better without making them less human. Together, we can save everyone." "Don't listen to her," Kai urged. "She's been psychologically compromised by the flawed enhancements. She can't be trusted." "And you can." Elena laughed bitterly. "You've been lying to me for 20 years. Because I love you," Kai said desperately, and for the first time since the betrayal was revealed, Elena heard genuine emotion in his voice. Everything I did was to protect you from worse fates. Hayashi Corporation would have taken you by force years ago if I hadn't convinced them that subtle manipulation would be more effective. Elena stared at him, seeing the pain in his eyes, the genuine anguish. You really do love me. More than my own life, Kai confirmed. Which is why I'm begging you, don't trust Akiko. Complete the research with us. Help us find a way to reverse the enhancement process. We can save your mother, save all of them. By destroying their consciousness entirely? By giving them peace, Kai replied. No more suffering, no more pain, no more fear. Isn't that better than the alternative? Elena looked around the room one final time, at the enhanced soldiers with their empty eyes, at her mother's artificially serene face on the screen, at Tanaka dying slowly on the floor, at May calculating the exact moment to deploy global consciousness modification. And she realized that there was no good choice. Every path led to horror. Save her mother by completing research that would lobotomize millions? Trust Akiko's promise of perfect enhancement despite 20 years of betrayal? Activate the kill switch and murder thousands of innocent victims to prevent a greater atrocity? I need time, Elena said finally, her voice broken with despair. You have 30 minutes, May replied, checking her watch. Then we begin the consciousness bridge deployment with or without your cooperation. As enhanced soldiers moved to escort Elena to a secure room, she caught one last glimpse of her mother's face on the screen. For just a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of the woman who had raised her, desperate, terrified, pleading. Then it was gone, replaced by that serene emptiness, and Elena understood that her mother was already lost. The question was, how many others would she lose before this was over? Elena sat alone in the sterile holding room, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. These fingers had written equations that could reshape human consciousness. These palms had been kissed by a man who had spent 20 years orchestrating her manipulation. These arms had once held her mother when cancer threatened to steal her away, only to lose her to something far worse. The timer on the wall showed 23 minutes remaining. In 23 minutes, May would begin global deployment of the consciousness bridge, lobotomizing anyone connected to the quantum field network. In 23 minutes, her mother would either be restored to full humanity or killed outright. In 23 minutes, Elena would have to choose between the individual she loved most and the species she'd sworn to protect. Some gifts don't die, she thought, remembering her own words from what felt like a lifetime ago. They just wait in the shadows. The door opened, and Elena expected to see Kai or one of the enhanced soldiers. Instead, Tanaka limped in, his leg crudely bandaged, his face gray with blood loss and grief. They think I'm too broken to be a threat, he said, settling heavily into the chair across from her. They're probably right. Elena studied his face, seeing something she hadn't noticed before, a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there during the chaos of the conference room. Your son. You know he's really dead, don't you? I've known for 6 months, Tanaka confirmed quietly. The boy Akiko showed us. He has Kenji's memories, his mannerisms, but his laugh is wrong. A father knows his child's laugh. Elena felt her heart crack open a little more. Then why did you play along? Because grief makes us stupid, Tanaka replied with bitter honesty. Because I wanted so desperately for him to be alive that I was willing to believe any lie that offered hope. Even lies that would destroy the world. They sat in silence for a moment, two people who had lost everything, waiting for the countdown to reach 0. There's something you need to know, Tanaka said finally. About Kai. Elena's stomach clenched. What about him? 20 years ago, when you left the university, it wasn't just your mother's cancer that forced you out. Tanaka's voice was gentle, careful. There was a fire in the computer lab. All your research backups were destroyed. All your original notes gone. Elena's blood ran cold. That's not possible. I had multiple backups, redundant systems. Kai Nakayama was the only person with access to all your backup locations, Tanaka continued. The fire was officially ruled an electrical fault, but the insurance investigation found evidence of accelerant. The room spun around Elena as the implications crashed over her. He destroyed my research, and then spent 20 years helping various organizations try to recreate it, Tanaka confirmed. Playing all sides, selling pieces of your work to the highest bidder while making sure no one could complete it without you. He's been the puppet master behind every organization that's pursued your research. Elena's breath came in short, Sharp gasps as the final piece of her manipulation revealed itself. Kai hadn't been protecting her. He'd been controlling the market for her brilliance, ensuring that he would be indispensable when the time came to finally collect his prize. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena whispered. "Because in 10 minutes, I'm going to help you escape this room," Tanaka said, his voice steady despite the pain etched in his features. "And because you need to understand that everyone who claims to love you has been using you. Everyone except Akiko," Tanaka finished. "Yes, the woman who stole your research, built her life on it, and then spent 5 years trying to perfect it. She's the only one who never lied about her motives." Elena stared at him, the irony so sharp it felt like a physical wound. Her greatest betrayer might be her only honest ally. "What do you want from me, Tanaka?" "Nothing," he replied. "My son is dead. My wife is a monster. My company has been building weapons of mass destruction in my name for 20 years. I have nothing left to lose, which makes me the only person in this building you can trust." Before Elena could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed and automated voices announced, "Security breach. Level 7. All enhanced units to defensive positions." Tanaka smiled grimly. "That would be Akiko. She's coming for you." The door exploded inward as enhanced soldiers rushed in, but they weren't the empty-eyed automatons from before. These subjects moved with fluid grace, their faces alive with intelligence and determination. And leading them was Akiko herself, no longer the carefully controlled figure from the video feeds. "Hello, Elena," Akiko said, her voice carrying warmth that Elena remembered from their university days. "I've come to bring you home." "This isn't home," Elena replied, but she was already standing, already moving toward the door. "No," Akiko agreed, extending her hand. "But it's where we're going to build one." Elena hesitated, staring at the offered hand. 20 years of betrayal. 20 years of stolen dreams. And now Akiko was asking her to trust again. "The enhancement process," Elena said. "The one you've perfected. What does it cost?" Akiko's expression grew solemn. "Everything. The old self dies completely. Every fear, every limiting belief, every wound from the past. But what emerges is more. Enhanced not just in intelligence, but in empathy, in connection, in the ability to love without reservation. And if it goes wrong, then we die as ourselves instead of living as someone else's idea of perfection." Elena looked back at Tanaka, who nodded once. Then she looked at the timer on the wall. 15 minutes. "My mother," Elena said, "is already beyond saving," Akiko replied with gentle honesty. "But the thousands of others, they can still be restored. If we complete the true consciousness bridge, we can reverse the lobotomization process globally. Give back what was stolen. At the cost of our own humanity? No," Akiko smiled. "At the cost of our limitations." Elena took Akiko's hand, feeling electricity arc between their fingers. Not metaphorical, but literal bioelectric feedback from whatever enhancements Akiko had undergone. "There's something else," Akiko said as they moved through corridors filled with unconscious enhanced soldiers. "The activation sequence you wrote on the whiteboard, it's not what they think it is." Elena's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "You've always been smarter than everyone gives you credit for," Akiko replied. "Even drugged, even manipulated, some part of you knew what was happening. The sequence you wrote isn't for the kill switch. It's for something else entirely." They reached a massive laboratory filled with quantum field generators and neural interface equipment that looked decades ahead of anything Elena had seen before. In the center of the room stood a single chair surrounded by crystalline matrices that hummed with barely contained energy. "It's the activation sequence for global consciousness expansion," Akiko explained. "Not enhancement, not lobotomization, not destruction. Evolution. The next step forward for every human being on Earth, simultaneously." Elena stared at the chair, understanding flooding through her like fire. The quantum field would connect every consciousness on the planet. Share knowledge, empathy, understanding across the entire species. "No more secrets," Akiko confirmed. "No more lies. No more manipulation. When every mind can touch every other mind, there's no room for the kind of evil that's been done in your name. But also no more privacy. No more individuality. No more loneliness," Akiko countered. "No more isolation. No more of the pain that's driven both of us for 20 years. Elena looked at the chair, then at Akiko, then at the timer display that showed 12 minutes remaining. "If I do this," Elena said slowly, If I activate global consciousness expansion, what happens to the people who've been enhanced already? What happens to my mother? They become part of the greater whole, Akiko replied. Their consciousness merges with the global field. They don't die. They become immortal as part of humanity's collective awareness. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice pressing down on her like the ocean itself. Save the individuals she loved by preserving their isolation, or save the species by ending individual consciousness entirely. When she opened her eyes, she knew what she had to do. Not your version, Elena said firmly. And not theirs. Something else. Something that gives people a choice. She moved to the control console, her fingers flying over interfaces that responded to her touch as if they'd been waiting for her specifically. Because they had been, this entire facility had been built around her research, designed for her hands, calibrated to her mind. What are you doing? Akiko asked, but there was wonder in her voice, not fear. Building a bridge, Elena replied, making adjustments to the quantum field generators with the confidence of absolute certainty. Not to enhance consciousness or destroy it or absorb it into some collective. A bridge that lets people choose their own level of connection. Her hands moved with increasing speed, rewriting code and adjusting frequencies, creating something entirely new from the foundation of her original research. Some people will choose complete individual privacy. Some will choose full collective consciousness. Most will choose something in between, connection without absorption, empathy without loss of self. The timer hit 7 minutes, and alarms began screaming as May's forces reached the laboratory door. Elena! Kai's voice carried over the noise as enhanced soldiers began cutting through the sealed entrance. Please, you don't understand what you're doing. But Elena did understand. For the first time in 20 years, she understood perfectly. Akiko, she said, not looking away from the console. I need you to promise me something. Anything. When this is over, when people can choose their level of consciousness connection, promise me you'll choose to remember our friendship. Not just the betrayal, not just the brilliant partnership, but the late nights when we talked about changing the world. Akiko's hand covered Elena's on the console. I promise. And Elena, yes, I never stopped loving you. Not as a partner, not as a friend. Everything I did was to preserve what we created together. Elena smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in 20 years. I know, and I forgive you. The laboratory doors exploded inward as enhanced soldiers poured in. But Elena was already initiating the sequence. Not the kill switch, not the consciousness bridge, not global enhancement. Something unprecedented, global choice. What have you done? May screamed as every screen in the laboratory lit up with cascading data streams. Given humanity what it's never had before, Elena replied, stepping into the central chair as quantum fields swirled around her. The chance to choose its own evolution. The neural interface needles slid into her skull, and Elena felt her consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of her individual mind. But instead of losing herself, she became more herself than she'd ever been, connected to every human mind on Earth, yet still distinctly, eternally Elena. And in that moment of perfect connection, she finally understood what she'd been building for 20 years. Not a bridge between quantum mechanics and consciousness. A bridge between isolation and connection. A bridge between what humanity was and what it could choose to become. The moment Elena's consciousness touched the quantum field, the world exploded into infinite connection. Every human mind on Earth suddenly had access to a choice they'd never imagined possible. Remain isolated in individual consciousness, or open themselves to varying degrees of empathic connection with the rest of humanity. The choice manifested as a simple question that appeared in every person's awareness, in their own language, in their own voice. How connected do you want to be? In the laboratory, Elena felt the neural interface mapping her consciousness onto the quantum field matrix, but instead of losing herself in the collective, she became the bridge itself, a living conduit through which every human could choose their level of connection without sacrificing their essential self. Through the field, she felt the first responses rippling across the globe like waves of light. In Tokyo, a businessman who had spent 20 years buried in spreadsheets suddenly felt his daughter's joy as she played in a park 3,000 miles away, and chose moderate connection to feel that love without drowning in every stranger's emotions. In New York, a homeless veteran experiencing the first genuine empathy he'd felt in decades from passers-by who could now sense his pain, chose deep connection to help others understand the cost of war. In Sao Paulo, A mother grieving her lost child felt the comfort of 10,000 other parents who had walked the same dark path, and chose healing connection that preserved her individuality while sharing her strength. But it was what happened to the enhanced subjects that revealed the true miracle of Elena's design. Around the world, 1,200 lobotomized soldiers and workers suddenly found their stolen emotions flooding back as the consciousness bridge restored the neural pathways that had been severed. Not as the empty automatons they'd become, but as whole human beings who retained their enhanced cognitive abilities while regaining their capacity for love, fear, joy, and grief. In the laboratory, Lieutenant Takashi Yamada collapsed to his knees as 24 months of suppressed emotion hit him like a tsunami. Through the consciousness field, Elena felt his anguish as he remembered his daughter's birthday party. Not as irrelevant data, but as the moment of pure love it had been. "My family," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Oh God, what have I done to my family?" "You survived," Elena said, her voice reaching him through both the air and the quantum field. "You endured until you could come home to them." But the most profound transformation was happening to the people who had orchestrated her manipulation. Mei Zhang, who had spent her career optimizing human consciousness by removing its inconvenient aspects, suddenly felt the full weight of every subject she'd experimented on. Their fear, their confusion, their desperate desire to remain human despite what was being done to them. The empathic feedback was so intense that she fell to her knees, sobbing with the force of genuine remorse for the first time in her adult life. "I'm sorry," she gasped, the words directed not at Elena but at the hundreds of consciousness scattered across the field. Every person she'd helped to lobotomize, all of whom could now choose to forgive or condemn her. "I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping. I thought emotion was weakness." Through the field, Elena felt their responses. Anger, yes, but also understanding. Forgiveness didn't come instantly, but the possibility of it existed in a way it never could have when minds were isolated from each other. Kai's transformation was even more profound. 20 years of manipulation and lies crumbled as Elena's consciousness touched his through the field, and she felt the truth of his actions with crystalline clarity. He had been trying to protect her. Every manipulation, every lie, every orchestrated encounter had been his desperate attempt to keep her safe from organizations that would have simply taken her by force. The fire that destroyed her research hadn't been sabotage. It had been his attempt to buy her time to disappear before Hayashi Corporation found her. "You let me believe you betrayed me," Elena said, her consciousness reaching out to his through the field. "Because believing that kept you angry," Kai replied, his mental voice breaking with 20 years of suppressed love. "And anger kept you strong. If you'd known I was trying to protect you, you would have tried to protect me back. And they would have used that to destroy us both." Elena felt the truth of it resonating through the quantum field, validated by the collective consciousness of everyone connected to the network. Kai's love for her hadn't been manipulation. It had been sacrifice. He'd allowed himself to become the villain in her story because villains were easier to resist than lovers asking for surrender. But the most shocking revelation came from Tanaka, whose consciousness touched Elena's with gentle determination. "There's something else you need to understand," his mental voice said. "About your mother." Through the field, Elena felt Tanaka's memories flowing toward her, and what she saw made her gasp in wonder. Hiroko Nakamura hadn't been experimented on at all. She volunteered, Tanaka's consciousness explained. 5 years ago, when she learned what Hayashi Corporation was planning, she came to them herself. Offered to be a test subject for the preliminary consciousness enhancement protocols. Elena's awareness reached out across the quantum field, searching, and found her mother's consciousness intact, brilliant, and more alive than she'd ever been. "Elena, sweetheart." Her mother's mental voice was warm with love and pride. "I've been waiting so long to talk to you properly." "Mom." "But they showed me you were lobotomized, empty." "I was acting," Hiroko replied with gentle amusement. "Pretending to be what they expected while gathering intelligence about their real plans. Do you think 20 years of raising a genius mathematician didn't teach me a thing or two about deception?" Elena's consciousness reeled as the implications hit her. You've been a spy?" "I've been a mother," Hiroko corrected. "Protecting my daughter the only way I could. When I learned they were hunting you, I made sure they found something else to focus on. A helpless old woman who could give them insights into how your mind worked." Through the quantum field, Elena felt the truth of her mother's sacrifice. 5 years of pretending to be a broken, manipulated victim, while actually documenting every aspect of Hayashi Corporation's experiments. 5 years of feeding them false information about Elena's psychological vulnerabilities, while secretly working to undermine their research. The real reason their enhancement protocols failed, Elena realized with dawning wonder, was because you sabotaged them from the inside. I made sure they could never perfect emotional ablation, Hiroko confirmed. Every subject retained some capacity for feeling, some spark of humanity that would eventually allow them to choose restoration if the right bridge was built. Elena felt tears of joy streaming down her physical face as the full scope of her mother's love revealed itself. Even the enhanced subjects who had seemed completely emotionless had been carrying hidden seeds of consciousness, protected by Hiroko's subtle sabotage. But the most profound transformation was happening to Akiko. Through the consciousness field, Elena felt her former friend's enhancement not as the psychotic break everyone had assumed, but as the first successful integration of cognitive enhancement with emotional amplification. Akiko hadn't gone mad. She'd become more human, more capable of love and connection than any baseline consciousness could sustain. I never betrayed you, Akiko's mental voice said, and Elena felt the truth of it resonating through every connection in the field. I built my career on our research because I knew someday you'd come back to reclaim it. Every paper I published, every advancement I made, was preparation for this moment. Elena felt Akiko's memories flowing through the field. 20 years of secretly protecting Elena's original research notes, hidden in quantum-encrypted files that could only be accessed by Elena's own brainwave patterns. 20 years of building the infrastructure that would eventually allow the consciousness bridge to function globally. 20 years of waiting for the moment when Elena would be ready to complete what they'd started together. The challenge, Elena realized with crystalline clarity, the $500 million prize, was my way of bringing you out of hiding, Akiko confirmed. I knew if I made the stakes high enough, if I created enough chaos around the research, eventually someone would flush you out. And when they did, I'd be ready. Through the consciousness field, Elena felt the truth of what had really happened. Every organization that had pursued her research had been manipulated by Akiko, played against each other in an elaborate 20-year chess game designed to keep Elena safe until the moment when the consciousness bridge technology was advanced enough to give humanity a real choice. But Kenji, Elena said, thinking of Tanaka's son, the boy in your videos, is safe, Akiko replied, and Elena felt a child's consciousness touch hers through the field, bright, curious, and completely unharmed. I've been protecting him from his father's grief and his grandfather's ambitions. The enhancement process I used on him isn't lobotomization, it's evolution. He chose to become more than human while remaining himself. Elena felt the truth of it through the field. The boy she'd seen wasn't a broken victim of experimentation. He was the first successful integration of enhanced consciousness with preserved humanity. Living proof that it was possible to transcend human limitations without sacrificing human nature. As the global consciousness bridge stabilized, Elena felt the collective awareness of humanity taking its first tentative steps toward connection. Not the forced optimization that May had envisioned, not the isolated individualism that had defined human existence for millennia, but something entirely new, chosen connection. People around the world were selecting their preferred level of consciousness integration, some choosing deep empathic bonds with their families, others selecting broader but lighter connections with their communities, still others preferring to remain mostly individual while staying connected to the global network for emergencies. But perhaps most remarkably, the enhanced subjects who had been lobotomized were choosing to retain their cognitive improvements while restoring their emotional capacity. They weren't returning to baseline humanity. They were becoming something unprecedented. Enhanced humans who had chosen their enhancement freely and could modify it at will. What we've created, Elena said, her consciousness expanding to touch every mind connected to the field, isn't just enhancement or restoration. It's genuine choice. For the first time in human history, people can consciously decide how they want to experience consciousness itself. Through the field, she felt the response from millions of minds. Wonder, gratitude, hope, and the overwhelming relief of no longer being alone with their thoughts and feelings. But the most profound response came from the people who had manipulated her life for 20 years. Through the consciousness bridge, they had experienced genuine empathy for the first time, felt the pain they had caused, understood the love they had dismissed, recognized the beauty of the consciousness they had tried to optimize away. Elena, May's voice reached her through both air and field, thick with genuine emotion. What can we do? How can we make amends for what we've done? Elena looked around the laboratory at the faces of people who had been her enemies moments before and were now struggling with the overwhelming experience of genuine human connection. You can choose, she said simply. Like everyone else, you can choose to be better than you were. And through the quantum consciousness field that now connected every human mind on Earth, Elena felt their choices rippling outward like waves of light. The choice to feel, the choice to connect, the choice to love without reservation, the choice to become more than they had ever dared to imagine. The consciousness bridge wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was the next step in human evolution. And for the first time in history, humanity got to choose how to take that step. 6 months after the global consciousness bridge activation, Elena stood in the garden of the research facility that had once been her prison, now transformed into the Institute for Conscious Evolution. Cherry blossoms drifted around her like snow, and through the quantum field, she could feel the gentle contentment of her mother tending to flowers just a few meters away. Hiroko Nakamura moved with the fluid grace of someone who had chosen moderate cognitive enhancement while retaining every ounce of her emotional depth. At 78, she was sharper than she'd been at 50, but more importantly, she was free to be herself completely for the first time in 5 years. The Beijing delegation is arriving this afternoon, her mother said, not looking up from the roses she was pruning. They want to discuss implementing consciousness choice protocols for their enhanced military units. Elena nodded, feeling through the field the mix of hope and anxiety from the Chinese enhanced subjects who had volunteered to be test cases for consciousness restoration. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save a few hundred lobotomized soldiers had become a global movement toward conscious evolution. Any word from the Americans? Elena asked. President Chun has agreed to the pilot program, Hiroko replied with satisfaction. 50 volunteers from their enhanced operative program will undergo choice integration next month. May is supervising the protocols personally. Elena smiled at the mention of Mei Zhang, whose transformation over the past 6 months had been remarkable to witness. The woman who had once seen emotion as inefficiency now dedicated her life to helping enhanced subjects reclaim their feelings while retaining their cognitive improvements. Through the consciousness field, Elena could feel May's daily wonder at the complexity and beauty of human emotion. Dr. Nakamura? A young voice called from the laboratory entrance, and Elena turned to see Kenji Tanaka approaching with his characteristic bright smile. At 12 years old, he had chosen a level of enhancement that gave him the cognitive capacity of a graduate-level researcher while preserving the emotional spontaneity of childhood. The result was extraordinary. A child who could discuss quantum mechanics with the world's leading physicists and still laugh with pure joy at a butterfly landing on his nose. What is it, Kenji? Elena asked, crouching down to his eye level despite the fact that his enhanced intellect made such gestures unnecessary. But she'd learned that enhanced or not, children still needed the physical comfort of adult attention. My father wants to speak with you, Kenji said, his expression growing more serious. He's made a decision about his enhancement level. Elena nodded, feeling a flutter of anticipation through the quantum field. Hiroshi Tanaka had spent the past 6 months in what he called consciousness rehabilitation, learning to live with the empathic feedback that showed him the full emotional impact of his corporate decisions over the years. The process had been painful but transformative. She found Tanaka in the meditation garden, sitting in lotus position with tears streaming down his face. But these weren't tears of pain. Through the consciousness field, Elena felt the profound joy radiating from him. I want full integration, he said without opening his eyes. I want to feel everything, the pain I've caused, the love I've missed, the connections I've ignored. I want to choose to be completely human. Elena sat beside him, feeling the weight of his decision through the field. Full consciousness integration meant opening himself completely to the emotional experiences of everyone he'd ever interacted with. Feeling the fear of the employees he'd fired, the grief of the families his policies had affected, the hope of the researchers who had believed in his vision. It will be overwhelming, Elena warned gently. The enhanced empathy protocols can be intense. I've been living with partial integration for 6 months, Tanaka replied, finally opening his eyes. I can feel fragments of what I've done, echoes of the pain I've caused. I need to feel all of it. How can I make real amends if I don't understand the full scope of the damage? Elena reached out through the consciousness field, touching the minds of the Institute's integration specialists. Within minutes, Dr. Sarah Kim, a former Hayashi Corporation researcher who had chosen moderate enhancement, arrived with the necessary equipment. "Are you certain about this, Mr. Tanaka?" Sarah asked, her enhanced empathy allowing her to feel his resolve directly through the field. "Full integration is irreversible. You'll feel every emotion at full intensity for the rest of your life." "Good," Tanaka replied simply. "It's time I learned how to be human." As the integration process began, Elena felt Kai's consciousness touch hers through the field, a gentle caress of love and understanding that still took her breath away after 6 months. Their relationship had been rebuilt from the ground up on a foundation of complete honesty, made possible by the consciousness bridge that prevented deception between connected minds. "How did the morning sessions go?" Kai's mental voice asked, warm with affection. "Remarkable," Elena replied, sharing through the field her memories of working with newly enhanced children who were learning to balance cognitive acceleration with emotional development. The 7-year-olds are already grasping mathematical concepts that used to require PhD-level training, but they're still children. Still innocent, still playful. "The best of both worlds," Kai observed, and Elena felt his satisfaction through their connection. He had chosen moderate enhancement himself, enough to understand Elena's brilliance without losing the gentle humanity that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. Their romance had bloomed slowly over the past 6 months, built on daily choices to be vulnerable with each other, to share not just thoughts but the deeper currents of emotion that the consciousness bridge made possible. It was a love unlike anything Elena had ever imagined, not the desperate attachment of isolated minds, but the conscious choice of 2 complete individuals to grow together. "Elena!" Another mental voice touched hers through the field, carrying the familiar warmth of her oldest friend. "Akiko," Elena responded, opening a deeper channel of communication. "How are the trials proceeding?" "Beyond our wildest projections," Akiko replied, and through the field Elena felt her friend's excitement. "The consciousness integration protocols are working perfectly. We now have over 3,000 enhanced subjects worldwide who have retained full emotional capacity while gaining unprecedented cognitive abilities." Akiko had become the public face of the consciousness evolution movement, traveling the world to help governments and organizations implement ethical enhancement protocols. Her own transformation had been the most dramatic of all, from a woman driven by bitter ambition to someone who radiated joy and purpose through every interaction. "There's something else," Akiko continued, her mental voice carrying a note of wonder. "The collective problem-solving capabilities are exceeding our models. Yesterday, a group of enhanced subjects in Nigeria solved a water purification challenge that's been stumping engineers for decades. They did it in 4 hours, working through the consciousness field." Elena felt a thrill of possibility through the connection. This was what she'd always dreamed her research might accomplish, not just individual enhancement, but collective evolution. Humanity was beginning to function as a truly connected species while preserving individual identity and choice. "Elena," her mother's voice called from the garden, "you have visitors." Elena made her way back to the main building, where she found a delegation of 12-year-old children waiting in the conference room. But these weren't ordinary children. They were the first generation born after the consciousness bridge activation, and they had grown up with the ability to choose their level of connection from birth. "Dr. Nakamura," their spokesperson said, "a girl named Yuki whose eyes held depths of understanding that would have been impossible in a baseline human child. We want to talk to you about the next phase." "Next phase?" Elena asked, settling into a chair across from them. "We've been connected to the consciousness field our entire lives," Yuki explained. "We can feel the potential for something even greater. Not just choice in how we connect to each other, but choice in how we connect to the universe itself." Elena's breath caught as she understood what they were suggesting. These children, raised with conscious choice as their birthright, were envisioning an evolution beyond even what she had imagined. Connection not just between human minds, but between human consciousness and the quantum fabric of reality itself. "We want to help you build the next bridge," another child said, his voice carrying the same mix of innocence and profound intelligence that characterized his generation. "The one that connects us to everything." Elena looked around the room at these extraordinary children, the first humans who had never known the loneliness of isolated consciousness, who had grown up making daily choices about connection and enhancement and growth. They were what humanity could become, beings of unlimited potential who remained fundamentally, beautifully human. "What do you think?" Elena asked through the consciousness field, opening the question to everyone connected to the network. Her mother, Kai, Akiko, Maid Tanaka, even the enhanced subjects working around the globe. The response came back as a symphony of agreement, wonder, and hope. Humanity was ready for the next step. Elena smiled, feeling the same excitement she'd experienced 20 years ago when she first began exploring the mathematics of consciousness. But this time, she wouldn't be working alone. This time, she had the collective wisdom of an entire species choosing to evolve together. "All right," she said to the children, whose faces lit up with joy. "Let's build a bridge to everything." As the sun set over the Institute, Elena felt through the consciousness field the gentle pulse of human consciousness around the globe. Millions of minds choosing moment by moment how to be connected, how to be enhanced, how to be human. It was beautiful beyond words, and it was only the beginning. Through her connection with Kai, she felt his love wrapping around her like warm sunlight. Through her bond with her mother, she felt the deep satisfaction of a parent watching her child fulfill her greatest potential. Through her friendship with Akiko, she felt the joy of collaboration and shared purpose. And through the broader field, she felt the hope of an entire species learning to choose its own evolution. Elena Nakamura had started as a maid trying to solve an impossible problem. She had become the architect of humanity's conscious transformation. And tomorrow, she would begin building bridges to possibilities that even her enhanced consciousness could barely imagine. The future was infinite, and for the first time in human history, humanity would get to choose exactly how infinite it wanted to become. What did this story teach you about the power of choice, the importance of human connection, and the courage it takes to trust in love even after betrayal? Elena's journey reminds us that our greatest gifts often hide in our darkest moments, waiting for the right time to transform not just our own lives, but the world itself. Drop your thoughts in the comments about which moment in Elena's story resonated most with you, and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world and your own unlimited potential within it.